So, Kip, we're really happy to have you kick off our first episode for Chauffeur here. I've gotten to know you really well over the last 2.5 years with our college program together. And I know Mike and Chris have really gotten to know you as well. But what I'm really looking forward to is our audience and a group of students to get to know you, because I think you just have so many stories that they can relate to. And what we're going to get into today is a perfect example of a story that I believe happened once you left college. So, without any further, wait, why don't we hear your adventure after college leading into the biodiesel industry? Maybe you can just give us a brief background about yourself too as well, and then get into it.
Yeah. Hey, thank you very much, guys, for having me and kicking this off. My name's Kip Moncrief. I live in Suffield, Connecticut. I've been a lover of all things cars, all things in motion, since as early as I can remember. I will say my biodiesel days actually started before college and during college, in the sense that I grew up also playing and working with a bunch of different cars. And one of the, I guess, simplest and easiest car that I first learned how to work on was Mercedes 300 diesel. And those cars are very, very simple.
Kind of a drag racer, right?
Yeah, very, 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 very simple, very, very slow. My mom liked that. I was obviously involved in other cars that were faster. But the thing that amazed me was I had read an article, I think I was 18, and had read an article about a gentleman in Western Mass driving his Mercedes diesel on vegetable oil. And that kind of led me down a rabbit hole of understanding that Rudolph Diesel actually created the diesel engine to run on peanut oil. He was trying a couple different alternative fuels, and then we're talking, over 100 years ago now, and to be used in a locomotive engine. He was trying a couple different fuels. He tried coal dust, other waste products, and he settled on vegetable oil. So a diesel engine compresses the fuel, and as it compresses that fuel, which is a gas, it creates heat, and that's where the combustion comes from. Whereas your modern gasoline powered car uses a spark plug to ignite. What I read was you can use vegetable oil to drive your car. And my dad knew this, and my dad had kind of understood what biodiesel was, which is a form of vegetable oil that's made into the fuel. But you can actually clean vegetable oil, whether, you're cooking oil, taking it from your parents' kitchen cabinet, or taking used cooking oil and filtering it. And if it's 80 degrees out, you're fine. If it goes below that, it'll gel and it won't work as well. So you can heat it up and use it as well. So I started experimenting, with that car, and I started mixing diesel and vegetable oil in the summer, and then later created a second tank that used the car's cooling system, so the radiator, so that would run a coil to a second gas tank, which would heat the vegetable oil up, and you can run the car on vegetable oil. So, as a young kid, I you laugh so hard when you're driving down the road on a waste product. And in college, I think you touched on, in college, the two friends that I had made were also really interested in it, and we ended up doing a couple road trips. And it's pretty funny when you stop at a roadside diner, you eat there, and you say, hey, do you mind if we take the grease out of your dumpster? And they're kind of like, what? And this is late 2000s, and it's kind of like, what are you talking about? And we would say, well, our car's a diesel, and we had kind of a mobile filtering operation that was very crude. You can take a pair of jeans, if you got a blown out knee in the jeans, you can cut them and roll them and basically make a bag filter. You sew the one side. That's about 5 microns of filtration, which is about what you want to use to filter out all of the waste cooking oil product. That's what you want to filter out, all of the food, all of the stuff you don't want. And then you can honestly run the car on that. So we would show them that we would do that. And, we were, taking cross-country trips that way and, from upstate New York to Florida, and really just having a lot of fun with it and learning along the way. It wasn't until, as you mentioned, after college with two of those two friends that we started Connecticut Biofuels. The idea was the business plan, if you will, was to create a waste oil collection business to collect the feedstock, and then to leverage that once that business was up and running to build a biodiesel facility. At the time, right before the Great Recession, a lot of, let's say, capital was flowing to green industries. Primarily, if you were in the biodiesel industry, a lot of people were trying to build biodiesel plants. But what we kind of understood was on the local scale or regional scale, you really want to control the supply, right? So we wanted to create a collection company to own our own supply of feedstock, of vegetable oil that we could then put into a biodiesel plant. And what a biodiesel plant does is it takes that raw vegetable oil through filtration, gets it to a speck of vegetable oil that can then go through a process called trans-esterification. And if you think about it at a very high level, it pulls the glycerin out of the vegetable oil, and it allows that end product to be used almost like a diesel fuel, and that can be blended into diesel fuel, home heating oil. As vegetable oil can be blended into home heating oil as well, but it allows you to create a spec fuel that won't gel in the cold temperatures. And so we were pretty successful. We were successful at growing a collection company, and we were successful with partnering with a company out of New York that had a biodiesel plant, and it kind of ebbed and flowed throughout those years. Oil was either very high or we had some fallout in the market, similar to what you're seeing today. So it made things challenging. It was a learning experience, though, and how to run a business. So a collection company, it's not a pretty business. This is not a .com Silicon Valley business. This is a heavy equipment, big trucks. You're going to restaurants, the casinos here in Connecticut, ballparks, schools, any place that had a commercial kitchen that was frying. That's who we targeted, and we grew very quickly. We also understood that it was a competitive landscape. You've got rendering companies. The rendering companies have been doing this for a long time, and they divert that waste stream of vegetable oil and other products into other things like cosmetics, paints, things like that you really just don't realize where all of this stuff goes. But it's a commodity. It's traded, and it was a learning experience. So kind of taking something from a kid, loving the fact that didn't have a lot of money to go on trips and road trips, and was able to take an old car, learn how it worked, and run it on an alternative fuel. And you have a huge smile on your face when you're driving down the road using a waste stream, and then tailored that into a job after college.
Now, did you ever think that you'd own a business in college? Was that a plan of yours before?
Yeah, for me, and I do work for a Fortune 50 company now. It's not my only source of income or fun, but I do think there's a big part of me that likes to create and likes to work with other people on maybe ideas, see where they go. This was definitely a big step into having a lot of responsibility. Before we kind of merged into the New York-based company, we had 6 employees. We had, at the time, 3 pumper trucks. So that was the vehicle we used to extract the veggie oil out of the dumpsters that we had at restaurants and other places. So just the infrastructure was a learning curve for me. The other interesting thing is, we were collecting maybe 15, 16 100,000 gallons a week on average, sometimes more, sometimes less. And that spanned across Connecticut, a little bit of Westchester, and sometimes into the greater Boston area. Right towards the end, we got a contract with Legal Seafoods to do their oil collection for a time, and we had that was pretty much our regional footprint. But when you think about it, for me, that was a pretty substantial, small business, and to be right out of school, managing people, managing the cash flow, it was a very big learning experience.
I'm like taken back in time right now and thinking about myself, like even coming out of college and like even just thinking about planning a business like this. Let's start with the vehicle though, because you said that you guys went around to a lot of different restaurants, stores, the casinos, and you actually transported the oil. What kind of vehicle did you use, and how did you even figure out what you needed in the beginning?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, it's not. It wasn't something that kind of came to us quickly. I think we used 55-gallon drums, and we were once those filled up, we were clamping the lid shut and getting them into a box truck. A lot of manual labor. It wasn't until we kind of had some cash flow that we were able to get the financing to go after a septic truck, believe it or not. So when I say a septic truck, if you're driving down the road and you see a medium-sized truck with a large tank on it, the way that you can transport oil quickly, some of these tanker trucks, you can pressurize the tank or in a way create suction. We were using that was the most effective tool for us. So you could the driver could stop at a location, use the vacuum on this tanker truck and suck all the grease out of our containers, and then close the valve, depressurize, and on to the next stop. And that was efficiency that was just incredible when we first got it. It was moving from you could take 15 minutes to get a barrel into a truck, and you're only getting 55 gallons.
I hope you weren't moonlighting as a septic drying facility.
No. This was a brand new, beautiful F750 with an international diesel engine in it, and a beautiful aluminum tank with baffles in it. It was beautiful. And subsequently 2 more after that. It was an interesting experience and learning, and I think the industry grew pretty quickly. This is not something that's not known. It might not be known to the greater public, but biodiesel, alternative fuels, at the time we still had Bush tax credits. So you had credits for producing biodiesel, about $1 a gallon. You had credits for blending. So I could take vegetable oil and work with an oil distribution company and blend a gallon of vegetable oil into a gallon of home heating oil, of diesel fuel, and there's a 50-cent credit for that. So there's a lot of incentive to get into this business, and there were a lot of, historic linkages in the rendering industry that were already using vegetable oil. So oddly enough, that drove up the price of vegetable oil pretty quick. We were able to get in and offer the service for free while restaurants were actually still paying for it. And over the course of less than a year, we were then paying for that veggie oil. Because the rendering companies were then starting to pay to hold on to their accounts.
And who was paying you? Who were your customers then, typically?
Yeah, so very, very good question. So in many ways, we were going after, once we had cleaned the product, we would be selling, our goal was to make biodiesel. We were selling to some of the larger companies that had gotten the financing and built biodiesel companies. So they actually had the rendering facility to take our product and turn it into biodiesel. Well, in any good business, you don't want to have, only one supplier, and you don't want to have only one customer. So we started to do some business with some of the regional oil companies, home heating oil companies. And that was largely in part because we could clean our vegetable oil, let's say at an industrial scale. When I said earlier, you could clean down to about 5 microns with your pair of jeans. If you can get it about that clean and get the water content out of it, that is a product that can get blended into home heating oil. And at the time, I had mentioned the incentives for blending. So we started to work with a couple oil companies to be able to, blend our product into theirs. And that was another outlet for sales. And we still felt good about it because you're taking a waste product and you're diluting the dyno diesel, and you're able to create a product that's less harmful to the environment, and in a way recycling used vegetable oil.
So what was any strange places that you got the oil? Any crazy stories in terms of how this all worked?
I'll tell you right now that whenever my wife and I go out to dinner or I'm with friends, they always ask me, "Hey, how's the oil at this place?" And I will say I learned a lot. Some of the very high end, I won't name any names, restaurants, you go to their oil and you realize, wow, they didn't really change their oil a lot. And if this is the way they treat their waste area, what does the back end of the kitchen look like? Those thoughts start to creep into your mind. But yeah, I mean, there's been some interesting just experiences. Anytime you're moving liquid with a pressurized vessel, you kind of operate with a sense of being deliberate in your actions and also a healthy dose of fear. We definitely had a couple instances where you get a clog. There are certain animals that are attracted to vegetable oil, and they might fall in. They might be at the bottom of the barrel, and somebody doesn't see it, and that gets sucked up. And those were always interesting calls, either from the drivers or when I was doing it myself. And using pressure to try to clear a hose and making sure you don't make a mess. If you can imagine, it's challenging to, in a city where you have limited parking, you might have to run a hose 200 feet. You might have to connect more hoses to get into the basement of a building, to maybe go through another cellar door into a different part of a building. So we would call those the long pulls. And, we had places in New Haven where you had to go through like the front of a diner down into their basement into another building where they kept their, that was where they were designated to keep their oil and waste. We had, one in Greenwich where you had to get there at like 4:30 in the morning because you basically had to block the road right off Greenwich Avenue. So, they don't want you there after 6 a.m. And so that was interesting, kind of, not coming from a background where appreciating the service industry and the hours of the service industry. And I think you learn how different cities function. So, as you got closer to New York City, you really wanted to be there by 4 a.m. So you were leaving, at 3:30 or such to get there. Whereas, New Haven, being maybe more centered around Yale, started a little bit later. So you could maybe start a little bit later, or if I was driving the truck or one of the drivers hit Greenwich and was coming back, they would be in New Haven at 7:30, getting oil in some of the tricky locations before that city effectively started its day. Whereas Hartford, being an insurance capital, they really started a lot earlier. So if you weren't in there in some of the hard locations by 7, you might be challenged. But then you had, we used to get, because we're focused on cars here, we used to get oil from Lime Rock Park. And, we'd have to actually put a couple dumpsters out there. And we were really only going out there once a year, right? Because they only have so many events, and that's a far distance in a rural area where you really have to make your routes make money, right? You're spending fuel to get out there. You're paying hourly rate to get out there. That's a good question. We definitely had some very interesting locations and challenges to get the oil, physically get it.
Now, what about storage of it, Kip? Now, was this what was the facility like? How was that infrastructure built up? And give me the overview now up until probably about the time that you ended up leaving as well. What came of it?
No, that's great. So we had 2 locations. We had a location in Bethany, Connecticut, starting off. And what we would do there is, frankly, we did have some storage on site, but we would fill the truck up and utilize the partner that we started to work with in New York. And once that truck was full, we would run down there, or they would be coming up to get it after it was filtered. I would say once we really started hitting, you could fill a truck in a day. We moved to a facility in Durham, Connecticut, so right smack dab in the middle of the state. If somebody asked me how I ended up in Durham, because we were in the New Haven area basically, and it happened to be in the middle of the state. We happened to have one of the partners went to Wesleyan, and happened to have a connection in an industrial park that would actually be able to have two 10,000-gallon tanks that we could use. So that's kind of how we ended up in Durham. So towards the end of our Connecticut operations and subsequent merger with the New York company, that was where we were. So we had what we called a front end system there, which the trucks would come in after the day. They could offload through basically our filter system. And then that oil, subsequently stored oil, for the most part, was ready to go into biodiesel production.
And how much of this was
there's
used
a little bit
for
more.
automobiles?
That's a good question. So the partnership with New York was probably the biggest outlet for us in the terms of between automobiles, home heating oil. The main consumers were the home heating oil businesses, but we did have a pump in the top of the Bronx in Hunts Point that was selling anywhere from a B5, so 5% biodiesel, 95% diesel, and in the summer I believe that went to a B50 out of our facility. So you would have people coming and filling up their cars, their diesel cars, right from the facility in New York. Which also reminds me, one really cool thing that I'm kind of proud of is you guys obviously remember September 11th in our country's history. They've done it for a while now, but there were, before the World Trade Center kind of was rebuilt, if you guys recall, they had some spotlights that would basically go up into the night sky from ground zero, basically, two massive lights, and they were powered by diesel generators. And our waste veggie oil derived biodiesel fueled those generators to power those lights. So I have some pictures that I'll send you guys, but for the most part, I think 90% of our fuel was going to home heating oil, and the rest was to support automotive folks.
Now, during its heyday, which is probably about the time that you folks were active, because you don't hear a lot about this today, although perhaps it'll make its way back when the price of oil goes back up.
Mm-hmm.
How many people ran their car 100%, even for part of the year, on vegetable oil, or was that never really the case?
You'd be surprised. The more and more, especially at a younger age, when I started to fool around with just running on straight vegetable oil, I ran into a lot of, folks kind of in this region, typical Yankee New Englanders who are probably were into it because it was cheap, free at one time, and the fact that a lot of these folks are car enthusiasts. And we're playing with old Volkswagen diesels, old Mercedes diesels, Peugeot diesels, cars that, frankly, are still on the road today with limited maintenance.
Wow.
And it's a testament to, hey, they don't build them like they used to. I mean, they really don't. And, I think you're correct that with the price of oil, I mean, futures traders getting totally burnt 2 weeks ago with oil going negative. I think you'll see maybe a resurgence of this once we get back up to $80, $100, $150 a barrel at some point, if that happens due to global conflicts or any unforeseen kind of things that may disrupt the oil supply. It's true, we have been in a recent past years where oil has been cheap. And, I think with Volkswagen's Dieselgate, the idea of diesel is dirty in this country. And, unless you're talking about veg oil, it's a high sulfur content Even though there's low sulfur diesels offered, it's a high particulate fuel at the end of the day. So unless you are running veggie oil or biodiesel, it is a higher particulate, but a more efficient engine, which really gets overlooked. And I think the car guys and gals that I know that love diesels, we love the fact that Le Mans in the past 10 years, so the 24-hour race, endurance race, most of that lineup, most of those wins were by diesel-powered vehicles, which is amazing. And a lot of that has to do with the efficiency. A lot of that has to do with torque and power. And the diesel is a really beautiful design. I mean, it's a compression combustion engine, and they're very stout. And I think I'm obviously very focused on cars and racing, but you do have a whole culture in this country that loves trucks. And I don't know how many times you see a Cummins or Power Stroke, or the Duramax, the Chevy equivalent, probably leaving somebody out. Some truck individual will be mad, but these are very popular engines because they go forever, and they have amazing stats as far as torque and power and reliability. But because gasoline is cheap now, if you do the math on a new diesel, yes, you might be getting 20% more fuel efficiency, but you really have to own that vehicle for 30 to 20 years to get that payback in some of the price differentiations between a gas-powered car and a diesel-powered car in this country. So it's interesting. I do think a lot of people were driving on veggie oil or biodiesel, whether it was a conscious decision or is currently for environmental reasons or for cost. I think you kind of have a little subculture across the country of people that are still doing it. And some people are even heating the homes with veggie oil. You can change the nozzle on your home heating oil style boiler and burn veggie oil or biodiesel in your home.
Now, from an octane perspective, if that's the right terminology, and then also by way of pollution effects, how does it compare to diesel fuel itself?
Right. So that's a really good question. Let's start with the power, right? The octane. A lot of there is a difference. There is a less of if you take the unit, the gallon or whatever amount of unit of veggie oil or biodiesel as opposed to diesel fuel, the amount of energy within that like-to-like unit is less in biodiesel. The interesting thing is if you get a chance, and hopefully we'll get a chance in the coming months, to drive a diesel using vegetable oil, it's amazing. Diesels are loud, especially the old 80s Mercedes type diesels. The reason why people didn't like them is they're loud, they're clacking, they idle really loud, and they're soot. When you drive on vegetable oil, it's amazing. And because I would switch from running on diesel and I had to switch to be able to run on vegetable oil, it was amazing because you could feel it. The engine actually quiets, and the lubricity from the vegetable oil actually quiets the engine down, and it smooths things out. So it was really nice on the highways. It would kind of smooth. It would be a smoother ride that I could notice. Now my motor mounts could have been really old too, and it just kind of stopped the shaking a little bit. But from a power standpoint, it might not be as much, and I don't think you'll notice it in the performance of your vehicle, but you would notice it in maybe your mileage. Your mileage might not have been as good. It's kind of like if somebody tells you they can feel the difference between 93 and 89, they might be able to feel a difference if they're very, very in tuned. Not a modern car, because they won't hear the pinging, they won't hear. But what they'll notice is the fuel economy is probably 2 miles a gallon less. So that would be the same between vegetable oil and regular diesel, or biodiesel and regular diesel. Now the polluting aspect, or the cleanliness of it is light years better than diesel. The exact numbers are escaping me right now, but it is significant. Even a B5 blend, so 5% of biodiesel blended into your gallon of diesel fuel, is a significantly cleaner burn than less particulate than your diesel fuel, your dyno based diesel fuel.
Got it. So how long did you stay with this? How long was the track record of the company?
Yeah, so that was about 7 years. So like I said, there were a lot of up and downs. When we came out of the gate, we grew incredibly quick. I think we had like 600 accounts, so restaurants, schools, within less than a year. I mean, we grew super quick overnight. We were able to collect oil. We were able to have positive cash flow pretty quick. But as I kind of mentioned or alluded to, that industry turned on a dime. And what I realized is it's not fun being tied to an oil industry where you don't necessarily get to control pricing. Not that you get to control pricing, but you're subject to pricing that is global and it at times is volatile and out of your control. And we were competing against a 100-year-old industry, the rendering industry. So we were taking some of their market share, disrupting an industry that hadn't really been disrupted in a long time, 50, 100 years. And then, also with the ebbs and flows of oil, our cash flow became challenged, but finding ways to get around that, looking for newer customers, reaching out to the home heating oil business was, I think, a big help. And the blending of our veggie oil straight into home heating oil helped a lot. So that's, it was 7 years. I learned a lot. And I think I'm applying, some of the simple stuff, whether it's the sales of getting into a restaurant, to the people skills of having, teaching folks about what the business was doing that were coming to work for us. They might have been able to drive trucks, but collecting oil was a brand new experience. Taking all those with me to my day job and some of the other stuff I'm doing. Yeah. Yep.
One of the challenges now that we have electrical cars really pushing in the market, do you see other bio industry?
Yeah. So for me, I love electric cars. And I think I was asked, a question at a biodiesel conference actually in California. There was a electric car group there, an advocacy group, and they kind of couldn't understand why we really wanted biodiesel to succeed. And for me, at the time, if you asked me, did I like electric cars? Of course, I love electric cars. At the time, in parts of the country, and even still today, an electric car might actually be a coal-powered car. So for me, I see biodiesel and some of these alternative fuels as like the first stepping stone to getting to, a fully clean way of not just driving, but of our country and the globe living. And I think we will still need diesel to get us to a point where our battery storage capabilities and efficiencies are something that we can totally rely on. I do like diesel as a backup in the future, but I think we still probably have 10, 15 more years till we're really at a point where electric cars are affordable for everybody. They make sense. They have the range, and they can kind of support our needs as an American public that we drive everywhere. I mean, we're very different than Europe. My sister has a Nissan Leaf and was doing a commute from Brantford on the shoreline into New Haven, and it was a challenge. And we joked she would turn on her heat in the winter or her even AC in the summer, and you're using electricity. And for us in normal cars, what do we turn on the heat? That's free. That's waste from the engine. We're getting that. That's free. AC, yeah, it's robbing a little bit of horsepower, but it's not that bad. We're so used to this kind of stuff. And I think we're getting there. And I would say the last 5 years have been amazing for electric cars. But I do think for the vast majority of the public, the cost of fuel right now is so cheap that, and kind of the new normal of COVID or post-COVID that we're living in, your people are making household decisions, right? Weighing what they can afford and can't afford. And, electric cars might be a luxury for some people right now, but I think we're getting there. I think there's a path to get there for sure.
How about a concept of a biodiesel hybrid Is that something that's popular? Is there negatives or positives about that? You don't see that. You see hybrid
Yeah.
gas vehicles, right?
You're right, and I think that comes down to consumer desire. So people didn't want diesels, so they don't want a diesel hybrid. They want a gas hybrid. In this country specifically, you pull up to a pump not all the time. You're not going to find diesel all the time. And when you drive diesel cars, you kind of know where you're going. On the big interstates, you'll be able to at least be at a truck stop. The nozzle might be bigger, and you might have to be careful because it might be for a tractor trailer truck, but you're going to be able to find it. But for the mainstream public that's actually looking for a hybrid, they're not. That consumer kind of sentiment is probably not going to be there. They have developed and there are, I believe, some in production diesel electric hybrids, but they're not here in the U.S. And I think it really just comes down to we're very gasoline focused in kind of what Detroit's pumping out and what our consumers want. I think Joe, you drive a
hybrid.
Yeah.
Don't worry, there'll be another one there. No, yeah. But I've had Wranglers. I've had a Wrangler. I've had two other sports cars, and then actually, what led me to the hybrid was actually the economic point of view that you brought up. At that time, it was just, I wanted something that was cheaper on gas because I was used to the truck back when gasoline was like $3.50 a gallon, and I couldn't afford a Tesla. So naturally, the hybrid wasn't too bad of an option. But I didn't know as much about the renewable side of like vegetable oil to the extent that you brought up. Like I knew it was cleaner in general, but I didn't realize that even as an additive, it even like extends the fuel capacity or capabilities, and then it also actually makes it more renewable in general. So that was interesting to me. But
I mean, you're taking a waste stream and putting it right in.
Yeah, cool. Now, Kip, one of the things that you're going to be doing here at Chauffeur as well is coughing the cars. So maybe you can just quickly tell the students that are out there listening to this, what you kind of want to make of that and what you expect of it and what you can do for that.
Yeah, no, great segue. I'm still addicted to gasoline, and I still love sports cars. I like driving fast on tracks and racing. And I really like the camaraderie and culture around all of it. Whether it's an American muscle car, we have cruise nights here. That's basically what those are focused on. Whether I go to a vintage race at Lime Rock and see Ferraris and Bugattis and things like that going racing, and everything in between, right? Drifting is kind of taken off in this country. They do that out in Thompson, so that could be an event that we go do. I'm hoping we get to go do. But the idea would be, owning a car in the U.S. is in some ways a rite of passage. It's maybe not probably part of the American dream, but it's also the fact that, if you travel the globe, most people don't have cars, and they don't necessarily have the need in some cases. The public transportation or the population density is such where having a car could probably be more of a burden than anything, and it would be an extreme luxury. Whereas here, you grow up here, and like I said, as a young kid, you can buy a car. If you're 16, if you're 18, you can do whatever you want. But if your parents let you, and in some cases, even with modern cars, that are more computer oriented, you can still get a car. You can kind of customize it to how you want it, whether that's tuning, whether that's painting, and then there's just the fact of being able to drive. We have roads. We have, especially in New England, we have really beautiful areas. And I think, for students that will be coming to New England for the first time and wanting to explore, a car is a beautiful thing. You can take day trips. And I think what we're trying to offer is kind of all the benefits of that, all the benefits of coming to school here, having the ability to get off campus and explore the U.S. And the goal is to kind of create some social gatherings, whether that's an early morning coffee meetup and a sporty drive through some of our New England roads or other parts of the country, or it's going to a car show or other events that maybe we find interesting, whether that's road racing. I mentioned Lime Rock, whether it's a drift event in Thompson, Connecticut. And I think that's something really fun that we have to look forward to.
Great. And one of the last things, these are college students that are listening, what are the main takeaways that they should take away from your story today on your experience in the biodiesel industry?
Well, I mean, a lot of these students are coming to get an education now, whether they're choosing a business path or whether they're choosing, arts, humanities, all of which is what we need. I think part of the freedom of having a car is it goes hand in hand with the freedom of kind of making choices at this point in your life, and kind of maybe taking something you're passionate about and going and running with it and trying things out, right? It wasn't necessarily something that was destined to be, a unicorn that we were going to get paid $1 billion for, but that wasn't the sole intent. We were trying to make a business out of something that we were enjoying at the time and really passionate about. And I think students have that ability to dive head first into that kind of topic, whether it's cars related or not. But I think they're going to have a really good time.
Cool. Well, thanks, Kip, again for joining us today. And I think I'll give a little teaser out there. The next episode that people can expect will be about your crazy stories racing in Mexico, and this is the industry that led you into that. But thanks, everyone. And